So I guess the first thing I'd like to say is for those of you that are designers and who are designing things, whether it's products or systems or services actively, some of what I might be about to say will seem a little bit obvious to you, for which I apologize. The main reason for that, as we'll find out in this little conversation, is that the core of design thinking and design doing doesn't really change that much over time. Some of the processes have, some of the tools that we use have definitely changed, but the core of it hasn't really changed. What is changing is businesses' acceptance of the process and of the value of design. So, if we get going, what I'm going to do is, just for 30 seconds, British gave the introduction of what I do, but basically Tata Elxsi is a design consultancy, part of the $100-odd million Tata Elxsi group. And we're involved in all of the things that you can see on the screen there, or hopefully just about to see. Fairly recently, as I'll come to a little bit later, we've also added branding services to our portfolio of activity. Now then, I was really interested by the notion, let's say, or the briefing that was sent out, this notion that there is a separation between design thinking and design doing. And of course there is. There's the thinky bit, and then there's the implementation bit. But a favorite saying of mine, because it reminds me every day what it is that we're meant to be doing, is what I've just put up on the screen there, which is that a form without an idea is as pointless as an idea without a form. And by that I mean, there are some people and some companies that think you just go ahead and pump out a product or a service or whatever it might be, and it doesn't really need a big idea behind it. Well, I would hope that we'd all agree, in those cases, either the company's wasting its time or it's wasting its resources. So, certainly, having ideas and design thinking is key to the next step. But the converse is also true. If there is too much thinking and too much talking and discussion and philosophizing about design, and nothing actually becomes real, then again, we're wasting our time. So, the first point I'd kind of like to make, for me, who actually doesn't very much like talking about design, I'd much rather do it, that's why I picked it as a career, design, in fact, is about thinking and doing at the same time, when it's done properly. So whether it's in the very early phases of a project, all the way through to production, whether that's physical production or digital production, the point is the iterative process of thinking about things, doing something, validating it, and then coming back to think about it again is essentially where design has its power. Yes, of course, design is also about having a vision. And as we know, in the minds of CEOs and business, this notion of getting fresh ideas, innovative ideas, and a vision for products, for services, and for companies continues to gather pace across the globe. But what we need to be very careful of, I think, as designers, is to remember that that vision also has to deliver a very pragmatic approach to how that vision gets delivered. We shouldn't forget about the craft of design, so whether that's sketching or using digital tools or new methods of prototyping, there is still a craft at the very core of what design does. And if we lose touch of that, then again, I think we kind of end up in a situation where it's more conceptual and philosophical than it is active. And the final point, which is desperately important, is that designers should be extremely good at selling and communicating what that vision is and why it's relevant to a business. So the world is full of ideas. My long-dead grandmother had lots of great ideas, but what she was not able to do was bring them to life in a pragmatic way, show what it meant so somebody could understand that idea, and then communicate it and sell it properly. So that combination of things is what design should be doing in the business context. And of course, there's another little alarm bell that's been ringing in my mind for a few years now, which is that design, in fact, is not a magic wand. It doesn't stand on its own and promise to solve everything, whether they're business problems or problems of the world. There are some people who perhaps would take that view, that design on its own can solve everything. However, if you look at the combination, and these are only some of them, some of the key issue involved in bringing a product or an idea to life, There are some people that think a design intervention in one of them is what design is. So if you look to the right-hand side, we've got style and image. And I still have clients every week that will say, boss, just give me a design. 2 designs, right? 50 grand, 2 designs. I just need a design, right? And of course, what I say to them is, well, in fact, design is not a dead thing. It's not like I'm just giving you a stone. Design is a process. In fact, design is something that is alive. And unless you use it and apply it all the way through the process, then you've got a very high chance of failure. So the point about integration, and I won't be the first person that has made this point or will, but lots of people still don't get it. Design has to touch every part of the process, and especially if you're talking about industrial design, design has to be there at the beginning for the consumer research, yes, in the concept and innovation phase, but all the way through to completion. Because at any point, the thing can fall over. Terribly fragile to get a really successful piece of design and innovation all the way through to reality. Ultimately, what's the point of all this activity and all this thinking and all this doing? Well, in the context of commercial industrial design, actually any commercial design, fundamentally it should be about solving business problems. Because if design can't prove that it can solve business problems, grow businesses and make things better, then pretty quickly it becomes irrelevant. And I think, and this isn't just an India phenomenon, perhaps too many people in the design community don't want to face that kind of commercial reality, that it is about helping businesses solve their problems. It might be a brand problem, it might be an ergonomics problem, it might be, doesn't matter what it is. There's lots of ways that design can intervene. And on that point, we should also remember design is not always used in the same way. So if you, and this is again a very short list, it might be very focused on making a functional improvement that maybe a consumer doesn't even notice. On the other hand, it might be a purely emotional piece of design. Styling has become, to an extent, a little bit of a dirty word in the world of design. But the fact is, on occasion, just making something more beautiful and more emotional is exactly what that business needs. And there's nothing wrong with that. The point I'm trying to make here is that designers and business need to be very clear what the intervention is about. So the same guy that says, boss, just give me one design, or 2, doesn't really understand what they're buying. Because is it a design about functionality? Is it about branding? Is it about communication? And so on. So having focus at the level of the intervention is also critical for the design thinking and doing bit to work properly. Now then, it's a perennial problem, if you ask me. Again, it's not India-centric. The question about whether design is expensive, and of course we can put a parentheses around that because it depends on the size of the client and the kind of project you're doing. But it is a fact, and this is not new either, that if you look at the total life cycle of launching anything, and I tell clients this every day, within a very few percent it costs the same amount of money to bring something not very good to the world as it does something very, very good indeed. Okay, so we should also remember that, because it's true. I said in the little spiel that I sent to the organizers, I would now give you some examples that would support that point. Does design work? Well, if you look at some of the facts and figures on the screen, which are from the UK Design Council and have been validated, as long as it's used properly and embraced properly, a point I'll touch on a bit later, then yes, it does work. In every single case, you see growth in companies, in revenue or in profitability or in the value of brands. So it does work, indeed. How does it happen? I'm just going to dance you through a few examples, some from my studio, our studio, and others from elsewhere. First critical point is that user-centered design is now, or should be, but I think globally is becoming the norm. And the critical point about this isn't just making end consumers happy, but it's about generating exactly the right insight and opportunity. So before we get into the development and the implementation of a design, being really sure why we're doing it and exactly what that's going to deliver to the market is ever more critical. And there are lots of good reasons for that, but one of them on the business side is to make sure that we are delivering no more and no less than is needed to make that customer happy. So today, across the globe, there are still lots and lots of examples of products and even services that are overloaded because the business doesn't really understand exactly what the customer wants and what they don't want. And that very early part of design thinking and insight helps build a better brief. Here we go, the Apple story again. Well, I have to apologize, but I couldn't leave it out. And there's an important, let's say, hidden truth here. So we know that apparently they've got $100 billion in the bank. And what's even more interesting is they're not doing anything with it, which some people find rather scary because they know what they're doing and they ain't investing it and they ain't spending it anywhere. So what are they up to? But the point of the Apple story is that, of course, every business dreams of design-driven profits. It's back to my point about design being perceived to be a magic wand. If I buy some renderings, magically my business will grow. Yeah, isn't it wonderful? Design is so cheap and efficient and blah, blah. And this pertains to the client side or the business side. Not that many people know that a full $1 billion was risked during the development of the original iPhone and some of the early MacBook products without any real guarantee of return. So the point I'm making is, yes, some of our clients and other people dream of design somehow enabling this thing overnight. But the fact is the need for investment, the need for completeness in the product development process does not go away. And usually that involves risking something, whether it's people's time or money. So, yeah, that's the point. And the other point, of course, is this issue about completeness. So it's pretty easy to do a little sketch of a billet machined aluminium laptop and say, that's a great idea, why don't we do that? To make that real is where a lot of that $1 billion went. And design was involved all the way through to validating these machinings on Foxconn's line in China. Actually, lines are plural. So I'm trying to reiterate the point. It isn't a one-off, give me a drawing on a bit of paper. It has to be a complete process. Otherwise, it's got a good chance of falling over. Slightly different approach, but this is a sort of big business example again. This is a Hyundai product from the year 2000 that I think they were selling globally. And it had a perfectly decent engine and, you know, all the rest of it. Hopefully there's nobody in the audience that had some part of their brain removed that thinks this thing is exciting or beautiful. Anyway, at the time, the company thought this was a good, safe design to launch into the market. And then sometime around 2005, 2006, Hyundai Kia Group decided that they would invest wholeheartedly in the design function. So they hired a very talented guy from BMW. Depends on your taste. Maybe you think this is over or under style. But the point is, it's rather more appealing than that thing. Yeah? So they did that. And yes, they invested in quality and, of course, in engineering and in better plant. But they absolutely 150% embraced design sometime around 2005. This gentleman is Peter Schreier, who's the designer of the Audi TT. And the Volkswagen Group, rather foolishly in my view, managed to piss him off somehow. Nobody will ever know why. Maybe they wouldn't pay him what he wanted, but he said, right, I've done a brilliant job for you in VAG Group and I'm leaving. Now, at one stage, he was rumored to be the highest paid car designer on the planet. And given what some of the Americans still pay people, that's going some, okay? And that's testament to the fact that not only were they prepared to hire the right talent, but much more importantly, they gave this guy and his team the freedom to actually get on and do it. So it's one thing for an organization to say, yeah, design's great. Yeah, let's spend a little bit of money on design. And then not allow designers to do what they do best. And there are some examples of that in this country and elsewhere that are heartbreaking, because at the end of a 5-year cycle, the risk is that that company says, well, design's rubbish. It's an emperor's new clothes business. We spent all this money and nothing's happened. It only happens if you let designers do their job.